Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian. He never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out and steal the election.
It's election day in Macedonia. Or actually, election days. Due to the ongoing devastation of the coronavirus in Macedonia, which has now claimed nearly 400 lives, the July 15 elections will be spread out over 3 days of voting, with Monday and Tuesday, July 13 and 14, reserved for those who are sick and in hospital and others who must vote early. And then on Wednesday, July 15, the main event. How many Macedonians will come out to vote in the middle of a continuing pandemic? The answer to that might depend on how many Macedonians are tired of the rule of Zoran Zaev and Ali Ahmeti. The pair managed to take power under dubious circumstances and then proceeded to change Macedonia's name and identity, illegally of course, and pretty much give away much of Macedonia's history and heroes to both Greece and Bulgaria. And as for their promise to run a clean, corruption-free government, well, we all know how that has turned out. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin calling in from Skopje, Macedonia.
How you doing, Cvetin?
Good. Election fever getting to me. I mean, the work related with the election fever.
Right, yeah.
I guess.
Well, we're recording this on Sunday, July 12. It'll probably drop tomorrow, July 13.
13.
So that's we got 3 days of election or of voting and the elections. Today is officially as we record this, episode 79 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. Today is the official day of silence. Is that how it works?
Yeah. That's You're not allowed to broadcast any official party videos, or in the olden days the newspapers were not allowed to print any party slogans and stuff. But now with the electronics, it's
almost
completely
impossible
pointless.
to control.
Yeah, it's a joke.
Yeah, I don't understand. Never understood that. Maybe it's Is that in other European countries as well? Do you know?
I think so, yeah. You're supposed to sit down for 2 days and reflect on what you heard and...
Reflect. Let us pause
Yeah.
and reflect upon the gravity of the situation. Yeah, well, I mean, nothing...
so.
As conservatives, we very much believe in thoughtfulness and reflection about the bigger things in life, and we certainly believe in change, but change for change's sake, no. We believe in slow and deliberate thinking about it. And anyway, so speaking of change, July 15, the elections, will there be a change in the government of Macedonia? The polls, I think, certainly point to a election victory for Vumro Dopamine. The question is, what's the size of that victory? Are there any new polls out since we talked last week?
And no, and they're not allowed to run any additional polls now in this period. The main pollster, IRI, they did not run a poll before the elections, and good for them because all the others were scrambling and having divergent results and arguing over it. So, maybe it's good for them to stay out of the fray. We had NDI, their sister organization, jump into it, and they had this dubious poll in which they gave numbers, but then they also presented the leeway of 2%, so you could either see Vimero winning or SDSM winning, whatever is to your liking, and they generally showed SDSM winning, and then a few pollsters who worked with SDSM also had SDSM winning, and several pollsters who worked with Vimero, and most importantly, the McLaughlin group from DC, they also had polls showing Vimero winning, in both cases by a similar margin of about 2%. And then the McLaughlin's guys, they had it broken down by districts, and where, there are no Albanians, Vimero would win hands down and, hopefully win like 3-4 maybe even 5 seats advantage over SDSM, while in the other districts it's like 1 or 2 seats. So altogether, optimistically, Vimera people are hoping between 7 and 10, 12 seats advantage, and maybe if not outright 61 votes you need for forming a government, at least getting close enough so that there is no any second guessing among Albanian parties.
Right.
SDSM are hoping they beat DUI among the Albanians, score big among Albanians, even better than they did in 2016 when the US Embassy delivered them about estimated 60 to 70,000 Albanian votes, and that this would make it more or less even with Vimera, and then they beat Vimera in negotiations with the Albanian parties. This is what everybody's hoping for.
Wow. Well, we will see. Election, the actual time for voting on Wednesday, which is the main event, is what, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. local time?
It's extended to 9, I think, in the evening. It's so many different ideas, but I think it's until 9 to, reduce the crowding at the station. So it means that the results will be a bit later as well. Usually we get them in an hour and a half after the close vote at 7. But this time it will be even later.
Right. Yeah. Voting in the age of the coronas, as we call it here. I am assuming that they're going to have to be 2 meters, 6 feet apart, standing in line to vote. Everybody has to wear a mask. Lots of Purell and other hand sanitizers and whatnot.
Definitely.
Yeah, and as I said, have you seen any polls on the issue of people feeling comfortable going out and voting? Not polls, but any news about how many people said they just won't go out to vote because of the coronas, or they don't care, or have you seen anything like that?
There were proper polls specifically on this issue when Vimera was proposing August, September, like a safer date after everything has calmed down, and SDSM demanded as soon as possible June, early July, before the bottom of the economy falls down, and before the numbers, we see the numbers, and especially before all the wiretaps are released. So, and while SDSM was still hoping that they have some popularity because they're fighting the bad virus with a competent-looking healthcare minister. So polls were done, and it showed like a third of people were only willing to vote in June, July, and everybody else wanted to vote later. But once the date was set, among other things, under pressure from the US ambassador who, kept repeating that we need to have a legitimate government sooner, the virus be damned, no matter how many people die in the process. Obviously, once Vimera agreed to July 15th, they stopped their campaign, in which they were frankly warning the people, because, you can't campaign for elections and at the same time tell people that it's dangerous.
Right.
You bite the bullet. And, people are still, muffed about this. You don't know what to think about it. You're being thrown in a dangerous situation, especially the people who will be sitting and counting the votes. But then, we had elections in Serbia, in Croatia. People seem to be voting, although, their numbers are somewhat better than ours, but still people are showing up. So yeah, I guess people will vote. It's not smart. It's a very stupid idea, but what choice do we have? Honestly.
Right. Well, as I mentioned in the opening monologue, I think Macedonia, as of today, again, this Sunday, July 12, is at about 382 deaths. So by Wednesday, you'll be pushing 400, which is 200 per million, if you take an average of 2 million people. One of the highest rates in the region. But then again, as you mentioned, other countries have just held elections. It didn't suppress the voting turnout too much. And I think one of the things that will motivate people, as I alluded to in the monologue, is the number of scandals that have continued to rock the Macedonian government and Zoran Zaev. The latest being that he is the €6 million man, which is a slight reference to a 1970s show here in America, The $6 Million Man. So this latest,
we can rebuild it.
Yeah, we can rebuild it. We can make it better than before.
Steve Austin, astronaut, a man barely alive. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
But so he's worth at least 6 million euros, according to some media outlets. What's that all about?
Yeah, the biggest bombs, wiretaps are dropping as we get closer. And I'm not sure if this was the last one or if they'll continue into the electoral silence until election day. I'm still expecting even more. This was a bad one. I think we announced it once when there was a debate between Mickoski and Zaev, and Mickoski asked a pointed question. He said, "Do you know this lawyer who was involved in the scandal?" And Zaev said, "No, I don't know him." And now, sure enough, a tape drops in which Zaev says, "The lawyer came to me. He said that he's extorting the businessman, Jordan Kamchev, for 6 million. And I said, get out of here, I'm taking over. So this is my business now, my deal now." It's a very short audio. It's been trimmed at the beginning and the end. There's the ASMR crying foul that it's been trimmed, that he says, get out of here, as in saying no. But it's clear from his previous slide that he knew the lawyer. The lawyer is the brother of the judge who was putting Kamchev on trial. So basically, the lawyer came to Kamchev and he said, "Listen, my sister will put you away for a long time. You and Sasha Mialkov, who was also charged here, the security chief." And he said, "If you pay 6 million, and we need the money so my sister can retire in peace somewhere, then she will botch the trial and everything goes away." So now Vasil Demishkov, the brother of Judge Demishkov, obviously met with Zaev over this, negotiated this with Zaev. He was involved in other scandals. There were other leaks about this person. They showed that he took money. He took 3 million from a cigarette smuggler, which Vimera arrested and who was later released under SDSM. So this was a well-developed corruption network within the court, and Zaev is obviously on board with this, especially as there were additional wiretaps testimonies in which it was said that the trial was eventually botched by the fact that Katica Yaneva tried to blackmail Kamchev and was caught doing this. So now the trial is in tatters. But Mialkov, who was co-defendant, he helped Zaev get the votes to rename Macedonia. Practically, this was Sunday, this tape. On Saturday, there was another tape in which Zaev, a bit longer, in which Zaev is discussing how specifically these members of parliament came to him. He's discussing with them how to nullify the cases. And he's saying specifically the case against Ali Ahmeti, 2 cases against people from Vimera. This is all going down. I am controlling the Supreme Court. Katica is my person. He's practically saying, I'm going to, torpedo these trials, just as he's now, discussing taking money to torpedo the trial against Kamchev. And Mialkov, all the while also negotiating, taking money from them and taking, blackmailing the members of parliament who these guys control. And specifically, these were the trials, these were the cases which the Colored Revolution campaigned on. Sasha Mialkov was a notorious figure for the Colored Revolution. They were next to Gruevski, he was the most hated person in Vimera. And now the SDSM, the Colored Revolution people, see Zoran Zaev, the leader of the revolution, say that he's cutting deals with people from Vimera, with Kamchev, with Mialkov, to get them out of prison, to extort money from them. So it's a complete, total sledgehammer taken to the principles which they said they were espousing. This is hugely damaging stuff, not to mention that this is incriminatory. I mean, although the law was amended to make it look like Zaev can't go to prison because of this. Wiretaps can't be used as evidence anymore, even though they were used against Vimera. I mean, this is so clear-cut that, now that Boki is testifying every day about Zaev, I mean, there is so much evidence piling up, so that he can, be put away for a very, very long time for all of this.
Wow, that's disheartening, to say the least, just from a standpoint of the amount of corruption that has been going on in just the short 3-year period that Zoran Zaev has been running Macedonia. Again, after campaigning on we will be a clean and corruption-free government. Obviously, that didn't happen. On top of that, and I think you alluded to it a moment ago about the issue with the economy, of course. Now, to be fair to the government of Macedonia, to all governments, the coronavirus came along and put a stop on a lot of economic activity globally. However, you mentioned the economy there a moment ago, and of course the Macedonian government was caught with the coronavirus, as all governments were, and they're not responsible for the economic downturn as a result of the virus and what had to be done to shut down parts of the economy in Macedonia and everywhere else. But Zoran Zaev is the leader of the Socialist Party. Before 1991, the League of Communists of Macedonia was their name. They shed their Marxism-Leninism. They are not necessarily a free market party. They believe in higher taxes, more regulation, redistribution of wealth. I think was actually one of their campaign pillars back in 2016. And the economy, their economic program and policy, combined with the coronavirus, of course, has led to a real downturn in Macedonia's economy. And it's generally the case in elections around the world, at least in democracies, that people vote their pocketbook they vote based on how the economy is doing, if they're able to put food on the table and feed their children and put clothes on their children's backs and take a vacation once or twice a year. And in that regard, the current government of Macedonia has been tried and found wanting. And they have not been able to live up to what they promised. And of course, if they're reelected, I don't expect the economy to do much better, coronavirus aside. It's their economic policies that are devastating to the country. And of course, they promised, I think it's worth revisiting the fact that Zoran Zaev and his government promised that Macedonia would get into NATO and the European Union, and then Macedonians would be singing hosannas as they happily danced into the promised lands of NATO and the EU. Now, Macedonia is a member of NATO. I haven't seen any studies. It'd be interesting to see a study, if any's been done, on the economic effect, positive or negative, of Macedonia being in NATO. Because that was one of the promises from this government, that once Macedonia was in NATO, that investment would come into Macedonia because it would be seen as a more secure and more stable country, even as general crime rates have increased, I think, exponentially. Just as a casual outside observer, having been involved in Macedonia for nearly a quarter of a century, the number of assaults and robberies and murders have just exploded throughout Macedonia in the past 3 years. On the other issue of the European Union, of course, we keep waiting for that ever-elusive date when Macedonia is going to get an actual date to begin talks. And it keeps getting, the can is kicked down the road. The goalposts are continually moved forward. Macedonia still doesn't have a date to begin those talks. And of course, the European Union, after the Brexit issue, and that was all settled, more or less, they came up with a new negotiating framework for both Macedonia and Albania. Presumably, Macedonia will get a date this fall. but we still don't know that. But again, this all points to the fact that this government, the government of Zoran Zaev and Alex Mehmeti, in 2016 campaigned on a platform of we'll get Macedonia in NATO, we'll get Macedonia in the EU, and then the money will just pour in. And that has not happened. And of course it won't happen. First of all, with the European Union, even if Macedonia were to get a date in the fall, there's still many, many years, 6, 8, 10 years before Macedonia could actually become a member of the European Union, having to go through all of these negotiations and aligning its laws with European Union laws, which we won't go down the road, but of course that is basically handing over sovereignty to another parliament, another government, which violates the very principle of the consent of the government, a very Lockean principle on which Western democracy is based and founded. Let's see, where else was I going to go with this? There's so many places I could go. And as Macedonia continues with the negotiations for the EU, assuming it gets a date in the fall, we've got all these opportunities, going back to the name and identity issue, for Greece and Bulgaria to raise objections. Now, Zoran Zaev says that once those negotiations start, Greece and Bulgaria can't object. There's a dispute over that. Everything I've seen and read says that Bulgaria and Greece can object, and if they can object, we know for sure that they will object to the various parts of the negotiating procedures, and they will demand more concessions. And they will get more concessions if Zoran Zaev is reelected, because he has a proven track record of having given away the farm whenever Bulgaria and Greece demand it. So there's that. The economy, the name, the identity issue. And so again, this taking this back to, are Macedonians fed up and tired with this government? Do they want to continue down this path, or do they want to take a chance with Vomero Dopamine? Now, of course, Vomero has its own issues. It's got a relatively new leadership in charge. The candidates running for parliament, most of them have not run before, so it's not entirely known. You have to base your vote on what they say. They don't necessarily have a record for some of these more unknown ones. But that is the choice facing Macedonia on election day. Yeah,
the result of having the party purged in partisan witch trials by Katica Janeva and the likes of her. The party has a proven track record of fixing the economy before, in the dark period of the regime and isolation, as I've called it. If we were not opening a new manufacturing plant every month, we were laying the groundwork, and these were proper German, British, French, international car part producers and the likes. And now Zaev is posting pictures. He was not able to materialize almost anything out of the name change. We always presume that if ever Gruevski negotiates the name away, it would include a huge infrastructure and investment package and whatnot. Zaev, absent his marijuana plantations, has got nothing to show for it. And Shekirinska goes every other day to Krivolak, and they're literally talking about this army range in terms of American military investment and building roads in a place where nobody lives, which is used for, they built a village, Afghan-style village and African-style village, to train special forces when they roll into a village, how to shoot, not to shoot the civilians, playing war games there. And it's also used for artillery and helicopter gunship training, literally like a wasteland for shooting at it. And they keep talking about this as in terms of investments, as if anybody got a job out of this. It's shocking. It's unbelievable what they're doing with this. And contrast this to when Gruevski would go to a desolate stretch of land, and 2 years later you got a railway there, a gas pipeline, a highway, and 4 or 5 factories being opened up and people getting employed there. So there is absolutely no comparison here, not to mention the corruption coming from SDSM. You wouldn't dare start any kind of business under this environment. One of the wiretaps which came out was several thugs from Bitola, including one who is a company runs a company which wins contracts with a major, the biggest energy producer we have, the local coal plant, and then gives it to Zav's brother. So basically, it would be embarrassing if Zav's brother Vica would apply directly for the contract. So they got like a point person. So they're on the phone, and the tag tells this point person that there is some Vimera guy in Bitola who is talking too much about all of this, and he says we're going to torch his car. And this was discussed with Vice and Zav's, another relative of Zav, so literally like mafia-style discussions. And what normal person would invest, even if there were no coronavirus? Why would you invest in a country where the prime minister is extorting money from a businessman and his brother is winning contracts? And if somebody mentions that, hey, this is not what we were protesting for, you get your car burned down, to keep you quiet. I mean, that's not an environment you want to, if you plant a patch of potatoes, you'd still be worried that they'll extort some of it, and let alone anything more significant.
Right, yeah. Now, as you were talking about the former government of Nikola Gruevski, I remember fondly how his ministers and others, I forgot the name of the group within the government that was responsible, Invest in Macedonia, that were going out, literally the road shows all over the planet, having these slick, informative, high energy sales pitches, frankly, to groups of investors. And obviously they did their homework beforehand, so they would go into a city, they would have already brought in potential investors and companies, then present Macedonia and its opportunities. And you're right, they were opening factories, and folks were coming in, companies were coming in and employing people, and that just has not gone on at all, combined with, as you mentioned, not only the official corruption at the government level and, threatening to and then, setting cars on fire, but as I mentioned earlier, just the general crime and lawlessness that has gone up in Macedonia, the assaults, the burglaries, the murders. I'm sure a lot of that can be traced back to the drug trade. Ali Ahmeti is famous for saying that he's not so naive as to not understand where a lot of the financing for the NLA, the so-called National Liberation Army, where their financing came from, and how much of that that financing of that has gone into financing Dewey. I don't think we'll ever know. So again, Macedonia used to be, maybe it still is, but I remember when I lived there, 96 to 2003, I thought it was extremely safe, with the exception of the 99 war and the 2001 conflict, which were not the fault of Macedonians. It was just a very safe and pleasant place to be. But when you see the general crime and lawlessness going up, you would think that they voted to defund the police. But
hey, this is an Antifa government. I mean, it is Antifa inspired.
That is true. Yeah. But on that note, we talk about how the revolution always devours its own, and we've seen that, especially over the past couple of weeks, where Zaev has been caught saying that the colorful revolutionaries are his, and he hates them, and of course they've been fighting back. You follow that more than I do, especially on social media. How some of the colorful revolutionaries have been very disappointed with this guy.
One of them, first about the nature of the colored revolution, and if Antifa ever grabs power in the U.S. even more than it has now. I mean, they talked a good game, but in the end, you can obviously imagine how the heads of the FBI, CIA, all those people who go on CNN every other day, that they would be running the place, and what types of violations of human rights would occur under an Antifa regime, a Biden regime in the U.S., beginning with gun grabbing and mobs appearing in front of your house. We had all of this in Macedonia. Obviously, here our left is derived from a totalitarian system. Well, in your country, they're very quickly, learning how it works. We had one of these protesters. She's one of the craziest. I mean, you kind of give her a pass because on the count of this, but she had two interesting comments in 2 days. Like several days ago, she said there was a big revelation, as if we needed it, that our intelligence has been running an operation against opponents of the referendum, people calling for boycott of the 2018 referendum, on the premise that they're anti-NATO, and against the name change, etc., which is perfectly legitimate position to hold. Like, obviously, I boycotted the referendum, and I called people to boycott the referendum, and she says, "Well, of course, what did you expect? Of course, that the police is going to go after you if you are anti-NATO people, if you are opposed to NATO." Like, okay, this reveals the mindset very well. And then a few days later, she says, "I'm being threatened. If Vimera wins, I'm going to be in jeopardy. I have to flee the country, and it's not safe for me here." Well, you were threatening people with, seeking the secret police on them, literally, like the other day. And what do you expect? How do you expect people to respond to this? If your side has chosen to play this with using the Secret Service, wiretaps, the courts, planted, investigations, systematic arrests of the opposition, I mean, what do you expect is going to happen? How do you expect the other side to react? Zaev had the wiretaps on these people on the Colored Revolution, calling them, they're nothing. Electorally, I provide the numbers. Then he said, "I control all these George Soros ran groups." But then he also insulted the Albanians. So basically, the leaks were clearly pointed to. He also denigrated Branko Crvenkovski's people in SDSM. So there is no faction in his own party he didn't insult. And then one of the leaks had him talking to some person, presumably again Alexander Verushevsky, the son of his Secret Service advisor, shadowy figure in our intelligence, who helped him to power and is now working to topple him through his son. And he uses the word, this slur for Albanians. They call themselves in Albanian Shqiptar, but when Macedonian Serbs use a slight variation of the word, then it's considered unacceptable. And this other person uses this word, this slur for Albanians, and Zaev responds, "They're worthless, they're nothing," meaning Dewey has no votes. So now everybody's, colored people are campaigning against Zaev, Albanians. Dewey is obviously fighting to protect its turf among Albanians and says, "Look how they talk about us behind our backs." And, why vote for a Macedonian who delivers on some issues when you can vote for a proper Albanian and who will deliver on all the issues? So, yeah, it's a lot of ugliness, which we obviously sensed about Zaev, is coming, and the people who support him and the people who he has surrounded himself with has come to the surface, including corruption, totalitarianism, these toxic identity minority politics, racketeering of businesses, any violation of societal norms you can think of, we got them there, except for sexual scandals. But it's still early. We still have a few days, so
Oh, you're saying you might get there might audio or video might surface of him in bed with
with Boki. Actually, we had a little of that with Boki 13, so we didn't cover it extensively here because it's really too. And I couldn't even. I just recently realized that I got a very important technical part of the relationship wrong, which I'm not going to go into right now. But it was very embarrassing for me. And okay, but how am I supposed to know anyway? Which goes where?
Oh dear. Never mind.
Moving on.
Well, if it, the old adage that misery loves company, if it's any consolation, Cvetin, of all of the election crap and stuff going on in Macedonia, it's the same the
Yeah.
world over. We see it here. We see it throughout all of Europe, much of the rest of the world, where there is at least, quote unquote, democracy and the right to vote. There's or some semblance of it. The division lines among people in any country have just been they're stark, and everything that is going on in Macedonia in terms of the elections, we see that here. Of course, we have our own election coming up in November for the president. 435 members of the House, a third of the Senate, a lot of governor's races and things like that, and it's just as nasty here. Historians will tell you that regarding the United States of America, it's been nastier. It's hard to believe that, even going back to the election of 1800 between Jefferson and Adams. But be that as it may, it's nasty out there in Macedonia. It's nasty here. It's not going to get any better for those, hoping for a kumbaya moment where we all come together and hold hands and sing. It ain't going to happen, unfortunately. And so we just kind of have to live with it. For those of us like you and me that I mean, you do it for a living. I follow it closely, elections and politics in Macedonia. And here, of course, we have to remember that this is not all there is to life. This is the politics and all that is a very small part of our lives, or it should be a very small part of our lives. If it's totally our lives, it will consume you, and eventually you'll go mad.
Yeah.
So the vast majority of Macedonians, the vast majority of Americans aren't following it or thinking about it like we are, and that's good. They shouldn't be. And I saw, yesterday, I think Saturday it was, you posted on social media some lovely grilled steak that you were doing a barbecue, and that's good to get away from all that. And I did the same thing. I had to grill yesterday because it was too bloody hot outside, too bloody hot to run the oven inside. So
Wait,
nice.
it's colder for you to grill on the outside under the sun?
Well, no. I'd rather have the fire outside where it's already hot than have to turn on my oven in the house so. But I like grilling anyway. So.
But everything is political. I mean, even the choice of food and the style of preparation. And somebody told me, okay, thank God it's almost over. No, elections are just a phase, and like 2 days afterwards, even after the coalition making is done, and it's going to be horrific, obviously, depending on the scale of hopefully the scale of Vimero victory, and then. SDSM change a leader, probably this far leftist Mila Tsarovska, and then here we go again. Everything's so it's just going to be like maybe we buy a few months break, enough time to go on some semblance of vacation, and then so it's going to be never ending, especially in my country where both the economy is so dependent on the government sector, on the central government sector, that there is no getting away, there is no running a business independently of the government, and where geographically, the ethnic breakdown is such that any disturbance is affecting you directly. It's not like you have to move to the outer edge of the country in one way, in one direction or another, to be outside of the range of the long-range artillery, which both sides would have. So it's really not something like you can say, okay, I'm moving to Idaho, who cares? We don't have that. There is no escape here.
Right. Well, actually, so you mentioned vacations. Speaking of vacations, what countries can Macedonians go to if they want to escape for a little while? Are any of the nearby countries open?
We used to have, like a week ago, I think we still had Albania.
Used to have a week ago.
They let us in Serbia, Kosovo, and Albania. And if you want to go to an Albanian beach, or Jesus Christ, I did it once, and it was enough for a lifetime. But then we introduced some restrictions on them as part of our saying that the government wanted to insist that we are not the worst, the dirtiest shirt in the pile. So we imposed some restrictions on them. So I think they did reciprocate. So I'm not really sure at this point. Nobody of sane mind is traveling. Only there are some flights coming in, I suppose. Some of the Albanian diaspora will come here, but then they face like probably 2 weeks quarantine when they come home, wherever they come from, Germany, Switzerland. So even this, I suppose, I still haven't seen a reliable number in how many have come, but I'm sure this is going to be much more limited. And, smart money is stay at home, maybe go to Ohrid or, people are...
Except all of Macedonia is in
Yeah,
Ohrid right now.
people are buying these plastic swimming pools. I mean, it's that bad. It's gotten to that.
Oh, right. Which are made in
No, of
China, of course. So, well, there's Macedonia has other lakes. You can do, or you can go to the mountains.
Yeah.
Mavrovo, there's Doiran, Lake Tikvesh, of course Prespa.
Yeah.
But southern Macedonia, Solun and Halkidiki, that's still
Yeah,
closed.
they like the whole of the EU has closed its border to us. So Bulgaria, Greece are closed, and not to mention flying somewhere. It's unless you have a dual citizenship, don't even think about it.
I wonder if I could, because I want to come visit sometime this summer or fall. I could probably fly in through.
I think you can. Yes, I think you still can.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, that's something to consider. But before that, obviously, we'll have the elections, as you mentioned, the negotiations and the coalition haggling, etc., and we'll see what happens. We should talk about. I don't know if we're going to do this. We have a 9-hour time difference. Right now it's 11 a.m. here, so it's 8 p.m. your time. You mentioned the polls will close at 9 p.m. on Wednesday night. That'll be noon here. I mean, it could be 9 p.m. here, 6 a.m. Thursday there. We could do a podcast based on if you want to get up that early, or maybe you will have been up all night. Who knows?
Probably won't be sleeping much. Or let's see how it goes, and we can play it by ear. We can see what we can do. I'll of course be live tweeting the results, as will you, and
live stream podcast during the middle of the elections. There'll be plenty of opportunities, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. If I'm awake and depending on my level of inebriation, we can. No promises there.
Well, I hope it's at 9 p.m. At 9 p.m. my time. Yeah, I'll be having a couple of beers, but that would be 6 a.m. your time. I hope you're not having a couple of beers at 6 a.m. If you are, then it's really bad. So.
Well, it's hard liquor for celebration and beer for washing your face, I guess.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, let's wrap this up, and we'll have another podcast, I'm sure, later this week.
And God willing, we prevail.
Amen to that.
Okay, brother.
All right.
Take care.
Take care.